didn't have the answers. I didn't have the plan, I didn't have the answers. I actually felt like I was rudderless. Telling my children was really hard. Next most difficult call was my parents, around the age of 45. So it's likely that every company in the UK is going to have somebody of age in their workforce, and therefore being more aware of it is more critical than ever.
Therese, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
It's nice to see you again.
It's lovely to be here. I'm loving this new studio.
A bit different from the last time we met, right?
It is, but the sofas are still comfortable.
Yeah.
And the coffee's still good, so I'm not going to complain.
I think the problem is they get too comfortable, so like sometimes I'm like, relax and chill out. So you've been on a bit of a roller coaster.
I have.
Since that we last spoke in multiple ways.
Yeah.
As well, but just talk to everyone about why you wanted to come back on the show and kind of the journey that you've kind of been on so far.
I've had, this week actually completes a very turbulent year that I had in a very personal way. Mm-hmm. And I have shared it. I've been on social media and shared my journey. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And not to harp on just about my journey, but the reason that I thought it was important to talk about this is that breast cancer is it's the most common cancer in the UK. 55,000 women get diagnosed each year, which is around 1 every 10 minutes. But what I wasn't aware of is that the second most common cancer is prostate cancer. 52,000 men get diagnosed each year, which is close to 1 in every 10 minutes also. So I want to almost take gender out of the conversation and talk about the impact of cancer at work. Because everybody's journey is unique, everybody is different. And I thought I was pretty aware. For the last 20 odd years, I've done Race for Life. I thought I knew all the facts. But I was so unaware. And I guess having the spotlight on my own journey made me think, if I was in the position that I was in before as a CPO in a business, what is it that I would have wanted to know? Because I haven't got the answers, but what I have is now got all the questions that I wished I'd asked.
Yeah.
And another reason is there's a very commercial reason to be very aware of cancer and the impact at work, because it's covered from the moment that you're diagnosed under the Disability Discrimination Act. And therefore, every employer has got to show their commitment to making adjustments where they're required and where people need that. So there is a commercial reason. And then there's a very obvious reason where the gravity of the workforce is changing. We spoke before about midlife workers. Mm-hmm. We've talked about the impact of what happens with the challenges and opportunities that you have. But when it comes to midlife workers, 1/3 of the global workforce is over 50. With both breast cancer and with prostate cancer, it reaches a peak in terms of diagnosis around the age of 45. So it's likely that every company in the UK is going to have somebody of age in their workforce, and therefore being more aware of it is more critical than ever.
One of the things that struck me when you messaged me is, as a chief people officer and someone like myself also works in the space, neither of us knew about a lot of this stuff.
No.
Right?
No.
If you don't, right, and if the HR leaders don't, it's very unlikely that the rest of the leaders and part of the organisation are going to understand this.
It's so true. And I found a couple of things. Women talk about their situation a lot more than men. And I guess that's life, isn't it? I found lots of forums that were helpful. And I learned a lot, it was an education. It was like a masterclass. Having it myself was like a masterclass. But there was so much more that I wish I knew. But in these forums, one of the things that struck me is there were so many people talking about workplace issues that they were facing that I found myself trying to help, strangers that I never knew. And because I wanted to find out the facts for myself, because there was so much that I thought, well, actually that person, there's so many inconsistencies. The only thing that was consistent was the fact that people were treated so differently.
What were they saying?
There were horror stories. There were some absolute horror stories where, well, first of all, I think in some cases it's still taboo to talk about. So I found that, I remember one of my very first appointments, there was a lady sat next to me. She was very, very lovely. Her name was Leslie. But she hadn't told anybody at work about her diagnosis. Wow. Because she said they wouldn't understand. And I said, but if you have the conversation, surely they would understand. And she said, oh no, I work with blokes. They won't understand, and it's very personal. You know, I don't want them thinking about, you know, where I've got breast, you know, where I've got cancer, it's in my breast. And she said, no, I just don't want to have the conversation. There were other people that I met that, you know, their pay had stopped after a couple of weeks and they were on SSP. Affordability is a big, big factor. You know, you are, if you have treatment, depending, everybody's journey is different, but you know, if you have treatment which involves chemotherapy or radiotherapy, surgery, you know, you're on a treadmill of lots of different appointments and situations that you have to come across, and some of those leave you very, very fatigued. So your ability to be able to process and function goes down. You know, it just does. It has an impact on you. So I think the horror stories were from people that had spoken to the powers that be at work. And by the way, HR, you know, didn't come out as being very popular at all in terms of feeling that they felt safe to be able to talk. Line managers were the people that you know, that one goes to. But being able to know, am I going to get paid? What does that look like? Am I going to get time off the appointments? You know, because so many people have cancer, you can almost trivialize it. And one of the things I also learned is that people were saying, well, I got compared to another person that had cancer, and apparently they turned up to work through all their treatment, so the same's expected of me.
It's like a one size fits all.
So yeah, and of course everyone is so different. And I think there was, you know, so there was some real horror stories. There was also some very encouraging stories where companies paid all the way through treatment, you know, and people were treated very much as an individual. What do you need? You know, how can we support you? So there's some great examples of employers, but on balance, there was more that were poor. And this point around making adjustments, supporting, helping, being covered by the DDA, that was really an unknown.
When you say covered by DDA, like what do you mean by covered? As in they can't be let go? It doesn't mean that the companies are not going to pay them full salary.
No. What it does mean is when you're covered by the Disability Discrimination Act, and actually cancer is one of the only things that automatically qualifies you for it straight away on diagnosis. MS is another. But from the moment that you get that, there is a responsibility by your employer to make adjustments that are reasonably required. Now, that doesn't have to be money, but it could be time off and support for shifts. It could be, you know, if you say, I feel so tired, 1 in 3, even at the end of the journey, you know, there's facts that say that 1 in 3 have got cancer fatigue. Now, again, that doesn't matter whether you're male or female, that happens. So, you know, it could be that the tasks that you require aren't tasks that people can do. So what is it that you could offer that could help a person?
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
You know, I also heard that people just left work because they'd got a cancer diagnosis.
They just didn't know any of this stuff.
They didn't know that they could ask for support, didn't know that they could ask for help. You know, there's others that say, now I've had it, should I put it on my CV? You know, I've been let go, what's it going to look like? So that whole navigating what you do to manage yourself in employment or out of employment is something that I kind of knew it, but I never had the conversation about it. I can never recall even thinking about it in that way, you know, when I was working in corporate life.
Never really thought about that point you just said, like, would someone discriminate against hiring me because I had cancer? Wow.
Because you know yourself, when someone gives you, you know, someone has a conversation and you talk to them about a diagnosis that you've got, immediately the other person doesn't really know what to say. You know, they say they're sorry, but, you know, the head goes on one side, you know, and you get everything from kind of like, do you know how long you've got to live? Well, you know, hopefully quite a long time, to kind of like, oh, well, you know, everyone gets it. So, you know, the conversation and the dichotomy around responses is unbelievable.
And I assume by that reaction of what you said earlier as well, that HR teams and managers aren't trained on any of this stuff.
I don't think they are trained, no. I think there is an assumption that long-term sickness is put into a category that says the GP or your primary care outside the workplace will be the right people to talk to, you know, because you'll go into some kind of a process, which is true. That does happen. You know, your GP is the one that's supportive. But I think interventions that you can raise awareness at work, you know, making sure that you know where people can go for help, making sure that if people have got appointments for assessments like prostate cancer or breast cancer, that they turn up for those appointments. You know, very often people will say, I mean, I heard people saying that they didn't go to mammograms that were, you know, that they were reminded about, but they didn't go to them because they felt a bit overweight, so they didn't want to take their clothes off. So, I mean, I've been amazed at the comments that people have made, but also, you know, where people say, oh, I haven't got time to do the mammogram this week, I haven't got time to make that happen. You know, in my case, in August 22, I had a mammogram where the results were clear. So for me, that was me for the next few years. I didn't think anything of it. Fast forward to the January, I started to get a pain, and I remember I was working in New York, and I was there for a week, and I had a severe pain, and I know I can be a drama queen, so, you know, straight away I thought I was having a heart attack, and so I took myself off to one of these walk-in centres. And the first question that the GP there asked me was, when was the last time you had a mammogram? Now, there were no lumps. I didn't feel any lumps at all. And I said, well, August, just gone. And he said, oh, it won't be that, but keep an eye on it. Never thought any more of it. The pain went away. I kind of thought maybe it was just the flight or indigestion. And then a couple of weeks later, the pain came back again. And it's one of those things, you put it to the back of your head, must go and see the GP. So in March last year, I saw the GP. She examined me and she said, well, we'll refer you for your heart. Let's just see if there's anything going on there. And I said, well, actually, could I have a mammogram as well? And she said, you don't need it. You had one in August. And I said, but I'd like one. I've got something, you know. And she said, but she felt again. And she said, I can't see any reason why you'd want this. So when I got home, I contacted a consultant that I knew through some charity work that I'd done. And he said, come and see me next week. I was going away, actually. I was going to Amsterdam, and I said, oh, I can't really make Thursday at 8:30. Could I come another day? And he said, no, come in, get a later flight.
Yeah.
So I did. I got a later flight. I am so pleased that I went that day because I had a mammogram. From the mammogram, I was told that I needed to have an ultrasound, which I had that day. And from there, I had a biopsy. And at that point, 4 lumps were found. So I had 4 tumours. They were all individual. And they were quite sizable. That was a shock, considering that in the August before that, I had nothing. And, you know, I went on to have a mastectomy. And actually, when I had the mastectomy, they found a 5th tumour. I wasn't prepared for any of that. It was, you know...
For people listening who may not know, what is a mastectomy?
So a mastectomy is where you... cancer in the breast is in the tissue. So it's only in the tissue. So when they took away the breast, it's called a mastectomy.
Okay.
And with that, they take all of the breast tissue away, which gives you the best chance of cancer not returning. For me, at that point, it was in my lymph nodes also. So I had an operation that took my lymph nodes away from underneath my arm, which was quite painful. And then I had the mastectomy as well. And then, you know, I was very, very fortunate that I was able to have reconstruction at the same time.
Okay. Was that private NHS?
That was all NHS.
Interesting.
And even though I had private care, it was all NHS.
Why did
that
you do
I had.
Because most people would assume you would go private. Why?
Yeah, and there were moments where I wondered whether or not I should, but I had absolute faith in the consultant that I had, who was NHS. And at every point along the way, even talking to breast care nurses and talking to Macmillan, I was saying, I have got private healthcare, you know, should I use it? And my consultant assured me that the care that I was going to get was going to be the best.
Wow.
And I had confidence in that. Now, I know there's others that might think, well, actually, you know, if I've got it, I'd use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone's very, very personal. At every point along the way, I felt that I was listened to. I felt I was treated as an individual, and I didn't feel like I was a number. There was no reason. Honestly. Yeah, I can't applaud them enough.
Misconception. They get a lot of. I don't want to swear.
Yeah, they do.
They get a lot of stick.
Yeah, they do get a lot of stick. What
was the waiting list?
I was seen within 2 weeks.
Wow. For
an appointment with the oncologist, mm-hmm. and my operation was in the May. The only reason that I had to wait for that is I had to have the lymph node work done. Mm-hmm. So I felt like every part of the journey felt like I'd got a date. I knew what I needed to do. I kind of looked upon it a little bit like a work project, if I'm being honest. You know,
typical you.
Yeah, I did, because that's the way I cope, right? You know, I've been at work.
Like, you've been all smiles and you're a super positive person, but like, how did you deal with this emotionally?
The hardest thing.
Let's not pretend that it's, you know, like an easy journey. You've been on.
No, the hardest thing was to tell my children. So, you know, Shannon is the eldest, and you know, she's 28, Tara's 25. To make the phone call to those two was really hard.
Yeah.
And hard because you want to be brave, hard because you don't know what the outcome is at that point, and hard because you don't even know what your plan is. And for me, I've always been in control of a plan. Always, you know, what am I going to do? Right, this is how I'm going to make it work. I know the answer. For this, I didn't have the answers. I didn't have the plan. I didn't have the answers. I actually felt like I was rudderless. So telling my children was really hard. I think the next most difficult call was my parents. So, you know, I'm very privileged. They're both still alive. They're 85, they're 86 now. But, you know, to pick up the phone and talk to them. And my sister had lung cancer 5 years prior to that.
Oh, man.
So it was a big blow for them. And thank God Maria is really well. She's fantastic and a real role model for me.
That must have been quite helpful. I mean, having someone who's been through it.
Yeah, experience is huge. Mm-hmm. Experience of life is huge because you learn. Like I said, it was a masterclass for me. You learn and you educate yourself as you go through the journey. You can only do that through people that can share their story, and that's why sharing and networks are so powerful.
What would you say some of like common misconceptions that you came across that people think that you realised are untrue perhaps?
I think some of the misconceptions are that you're not going to be able to do anything for yourself.
Okay, helpless almost.
Yes, mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of the
what do you mean by that?
So there are things where people say, oh, you know, well, you won't be able to do that. Oh my God, you're not going to be able to do that when you've got cancer. You're not going to be able to walk. You're not going to be able to do this. So there was kind of like a camp of people that were in big C is just you're written off. You know, get things done for, oh, you don't want to be spending your money on that. You know, is it worth it? I'm still going to be here, I hope. So, you know, there was that mm-hmm. versus you're just the same. You're smiling, you're putting makeup on, so you're just the same. You know, and actually, you never know how a person is unless you ask them.
It's true, don't assume.
So there are days that I had fantastic days, and there was other days where I just thought, I don't feel so great today. My way of coping is to talk, you know, and to share and to laugh and to find joy in small things. There were days when that was quite tough. Again, everyone's different, but don't ever assume. You know, be in the moment with someone and don't ever assume you know what they're thinking. Ask them.
What advice, as part of what you just said, what advice would you give to people who find out a colleague or a friend or a family? Because I'm sure there's this natural approach that you want to tread on eggshells, or you don't want to, or ask them constantly, how are you, all the time, which maybe will get tiring. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there, but like, how would you best advise people to approach that?
One of the biggest learnings I had some years ago, I was a trustee for a charity for teenagers with cancer, Teens Unite. It's 15 years old. It was started by a friend of mine, Debbie Pisani, and Karen Millen, who was the fashion designer. And I learned that for teenagers, and these are children from the age of 13 to 24, and remember, cancer doesn't discriminate. You know, in very young children, it's leukemia, but you can get cancer at any age, and it doesn't discriminate whether you're male or female. One of the things that really struck me when I used to speak to the teenagers is that they didn't feel that their colleagues at school or their pals at school knew how to talk to them. You know, with boys, they'd send them text messages, which was just like a power, emoji of with girls, it was kind of like, oh my God, that poor person's lost their hair. They were treated very, very differently. And one of the things that they told me is they just wanted to be treated the same.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
They just wanted to be treated the same.
Don't. That's what I meant about the treading on eggshells around them. Just treat me the same. Don't write me off. Yeah,
exactly. I remember going out with a group of girls and saying to them, we were around at someone's house, and one of my friends said, look, I think everyone's going to be a bit nervous about, how to talk to you and whatever. And I said, but I'm still the same person. And, I said, as I walked through the door, I'm here to have a really nice time. Yeah.
I can tell you not everyone's going to be as open as you are to be brave enough to be like, come on, everyone, let's have fun. Don't worry about saying X, Y, and Z. But I'm sure a lot of people just hold it in.
And it is being supportive to people. When you have those types of conversations, what I found is that by being open, it gave people the opportunity, I think, to open up themselves. And I think that's what first line managers can do. If they ask a person how they are, and a person says, yeah, I'm fine, I'm good, thanks, it closes down the conversation. If you show some empathy and say, I've never been in your situation, I don't know what it's like, help me.
Be human. Amazing.
That's a completely different conversation. That person can then really open
truly
up.
Understands that you're not just asking the question just for the sake of it. That's what it feels like. You just read it out of a handbook. How are you? Right?
Yeah. And very often a process or a policy will lead you to do that rather than having those real conversations. And like I said, I didn't know what to expect. One of the things that happened to me is a lovely story, actually. It's a lady called Molly. She's 91. Molly got breast cancer 25 years ago. So, for me, she's a real inspiration as well. And Molly had a diagnosis, and she had a mastectomy and a reconstruction. So when I was diagnosed, she got in contact with me and said, come round, I'd like to have, tea with you. Anyway, I went round to her house. And now, bearing in mind now, she was 90 at the time, she said, would you like to see my breasts? I said, you don't need to do that, Molly, thank you, but you don't need to do that. Anyway, she proceeded to, show me. And one of the things that she did, she said, I've got a little gift for you as well. Now, this was before my surgery and everything. Hope it wasn't a what?
No. I don't know what it was. It was before and after and stuff like that. I don't know.
No. It was a little box.
Yeah.
The box was about this size. So it's a little box that she'd put on the table. Mm-hmm. She said, I'd like you to have this because once you've had your mastectomy and your reconstruction, it might be helpful for you. So I'm oblivious to all this. And I'm like, and I'm thinking, what's in the box? What is in the box? Yeah. Anyway, she showed me, her, did I want to feel? No, thank you. That's fine. Thanks very much. And, but I couldn't wait, being the person that I am, couldn't wait to see what was in the box.
What is in that box? Huh? Yeah.
It was a silicone nipple.
I was going to say that actually. You said my truth is what I thought was in the box is something like what you just said, but I was like, surely not. That's why I thought it said photos, but I did think it. I was like, no, Chris, you're crazy.
It was. You know, a lot of people bought me flowers. That was the most unique gift. That was the most unique gift I was thinking
given. I was like, no, it can't be. Stop, pause. You were like, what did you think it was? I was like, photos.
It was the most unique gift.
But you can tell, like, she's so sweet because I'm sure, and I mean, I can assume one of the biggest, one of the things is thinking like, oh, obviously you're on your breasts and the impact that's going to have, right? So
absolutely.
She was like,
oh, it was so sweet, you know and everyone should have a Molly in their life, you know. And by the way, she got married last year.
Oh wow!
To a guy that was a bit younger than her, but I mean, she's found happiness. You know, I mean, she's just a joy. Mm-hmm. But you talked about what are some of the horror stories. Women and men have talked to me about feeling like they've been amputated. Now, that's a really, really strong word. It's a word that I would have associated with war. I wouldn't have associated it with cancer. But there are real strength in how people feel about their bodies when they've had a change. And I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware people felt like that. I also have made friends with lots of different people. And some of that's online. But, you know, I also learned that for some women and men, but more women, some of their husbands, you know, their relationship has broken down completely because the man sees the woman differently. The woman sees herself differently. And for many men going through their journeys, their wives have treated them differently. Now, that is so sad to think that you could love someone, you could have a wonderful relationship, but illness puts fear into both of you to a point where your relationship breaks down at the very time when you need that support and that love around you.
That's horrible to hear, man. Like, the last thing I would want my wife to think about going through that is like, what is he going to think of me because my boob got there, or, you know, whatever, or vice versa as well, when you're in that time where you need them the most.
But Chris, it's exactly like that. So if you think about your own family unit, there should be safety within that. Mm-hmm. If there's moments where it's not safe, you start to question it. If you're then at work and you've got those insecurities anyway, and you're coming into the workplace, you know, your productivity isn't going to be great, your ability to really focus isn't going to be there, and you're not going to feel great. You know, you're just not going to feel good.
Probably going to feel trapped, right? Because you're not getting it in both places.
Exactly.
And now you're just sort of, I'm going home to this, I'm going to work to this.
Yeah.
Because I've always said that to Shane and the team, like, my home is my safe space.
Yes.
To recharge and be vulnerable and
be yourself.
It's okay not to be okay sometimes. Yeah. I've had a rough week this week, even with my anxiety and stuff like that. And I was saying to Tasha last night, I was like, I'm struggling. Like, I was trying to describe it as like a pressure cooker, and I was like, there's not much room left in this pressure cooker this week, so I need to really relax. And she was like, cool, no worries, I got you. But like, if I didn't have that, and I didn't have that, and I was struggling at home and at work, that's really tough. Yeah. To put you in that place.
And you asked about the impact on others. So, you know, again, I knew that from teenagers, the siblings feel, this comment that I'm going to make is quite strange, but people feel left out. So siblings feel left out because all of a sudden the person with cancer is getting all the attention.
Wow.
Now, it's not, of course they would never want their brother or sister to have cancer, but all of a sudden mum and dad's attention is somewhere else. So you feel a bit isolated.
Yeah.
And I wonder if in the home environment, you know, the wife or the husband, the partner, the girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, I think if that person is going through a journey where there's lots and lots of focus on them, it's almost like, well, you know, I'm just here to hold the pieces.
Yeah.
So there's so much in terms of those conversations that if there was a way in the workplace of being aware of some of those scenarios, just being able to think, what could we do to help? Now, you've got Macmillan Cancer, Breast Cancer Now, Cancer Research UK, all of those forums are fantastic. But it doesn't take much for any of us to raise our awareness and our education and our knowledge on the topic of cancer and what comes with it, because we're all going to face it, not through personal diagnosis, I hope, but you're going to face it through others, and certainly you'll experience it in the workplace.
What advice would you give to HR teams and leaders now?
Well, I haven't, as I said right from the beginning, I haven't got the answers, but there are a lot of things now that I would have put in place that
looking back,
totally. And the biggest one is around, well, the first thing is be in the moment. So every time a person has spoken to me about cancer, I must admit I've put everybody in the same bucket. So they've got cancer, that means that.
Interesting.
If you go on Cancer Research UK's website, there's over 100 of common cancers that people can experience. So it's not one size fits all. So,
and the only reason you realised that is because you went through the experience.
Because I went through it myself.
I had conversations with so many other. You just thought
cancer was one bucket for me.
I
it
think
was
for
one
most people
bucket.
that would be, unfortunately, because you just don't have the knowledge.
So totally, I think. Yeah, totally. I think it's don't put everyone in that same bucket. Everything's different. I've written down some things that I think if I would, I would do again. There's 10 of them, which I know you can put on there afterwards.
Sure.
Never miss an opportunity to share support. Whilst it is common, don't trivialize it, because everybody's journey is different. Everyone's journey is different. And don't compare. Just because X was able to come to work through their treatment doesn't mean that that person who's just told you about their diagnosis is going to have the same, the same response.
Sure.
Because it is different. The power of networks. I think there's a show on TV, that fishing show. It's White House and Mortimer, and I'm not a big fishing fan, but one of the things I learned from that is that you've got these two guys that talk about fishing, but they also talk about a shared experience that they both had, which was bypass surgery. So during their conversations about fish, they sort of talk about their condition. Deal with it. But whether it's the way men deal with it or not,
my stepdad
really
actually
powerful.
goes fishing with his friends.
Does he? What do they talk about?
And that's the time where they talk about
stuff,
relationships, how to get on with their wives, and that's their space. I'm not trivial. I'm not want to put everyone in a box, but just you maybe smile when you mention that, because whenever he's going off on his fishing trip, I'm like, have fun, because I know it's his time to decompress and actually have man time. where he can do it, and they do that over fishing, and they bond that way, and that's what he does. It's
such a good thing. I mean, and in the workplace, companies are great at supporting, Stand Up for Cancer and Movember and Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But there's not many organisations that have cancer networks. And I would say, gender neutralise it.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, whatever you're facing as a woman, my experience for the men that have reached out is they go through the same trauma as a man.
Why don't they do that? Do you think they just think there's not a big enough need for it, therefore we're not doing it? Or,
a lot of people that once they've completed their treatment, they don't want to talk about it. It's in the past.
I see.
But you're living with it every day. Even I'm a positive person, but there probably isn't a day that doesn't go past where I just think, I hope I'm okay, because those thoughts come in and out of your head.
How often do you have to get checked, if you don't mind me asking again, to make sure everything's...
So I have bone infusions 3 a year, and I'm on tablets for the next 10 years. And that hopefully will be everything that I need to keep everything...
What's bone infusion? Sorry.
So bone infusion is it's like having an intravenous drip.
Okay.
But one of the things that cancer can do is it can weaken your bones.
Oh, okay.
And so one of the things they do to protect your bones, not in every situation, but certainly in mine, is to give me a bone infusion 3 times a year.
Okay.
And that gives the bones a real boost, which is good. And then the tablets that I'm on a tablet called letrozole, and I'm on that for the next 10 years. And
is there any side effects of that you have to deal with?
There are, with any medication that you take, there's side effects. But I think if you are on something, I was told that if you're on something that doesn't work for you, talk to your oncologist. They'll find something else that does.
Okay, that's why I'm asking now.
Yeah. So, we're very early intervention and diagnosis is like never before in the UK now. It's great. There is more and more awareness, and there are more cases because people are being checked. But I think there's also this thought that, certainly from medical provision, nobody wants you to suffer. So if you're in pain, if something's not working, my experience is they'll try everything they can to get you on something that will work.
Amazing.
And again, being aware of that, I say, my cancer's gone. That's what I say, because that's how I deal with it. Mm-hmm. But I'm very aware that I'm on treatment to make sure it doesn't come back. And that's, for me, that's a real positive. The other thing is that I will have annual mastectomies, but on the other side, because like I said earlier, there's no breast tissue in the other side, so that it will be all on the other side, and that's good because it's monitoring, to make sure that there are no risks in the future. Mm-hmm. So, if you're called, that's the biggest thing that I can say as well. If you're called for an appointment, make sure you take it.
So I distracted you from your 10. Sorry.
Yeah, the networks. The other thing so the network at work, I would definitely put something like that in place. And the other thing that I learned on one of the forums was this thing called a DPP, which is a daily positive post. And I kind of thought in the beginning, I'd never get caught up in any of that. Why are people sharing a daily positive post? And it'd be a picture of maybe a daughter's wedding or a day out or a glass of wine, and I used to think, it's a bit, not in my world. I won't be doing DPPs. Well, guess what? Some of those days I lived for. What have people posted? Because it was feel good.
Yeah.
So again, you can introduce nice things that work in your environment, in your organisation. The daily positive post was fab. Train and educate those who support others. Going back to your point, you don't know unless you ask. You have to have meaningful conversations. You have to look at your policies. First of all, you have to be aware that it's even covered by the DDA. And what is a reasonable adjustment? What are we doing to support people? There's lots of information. It led me, that particular point led me to write some articles around what do you do when you get a diagnosis at work, what happens with the treatment at work, and then how do you return to work post-treatment. More men reached out to speak to me about their circumstances than women.
Really?
So women wanted to say, this is brilliant, this is great, HR professionals, this has really helped me. But there were so many men that said, this is my situation, I didn't know this, what would you do if you're in my situation? So there is definitely a need to neutralise and degender the conversation and talk about it in totality. So look at your processes, look at the adjustments, raise awareness to everyone. Use the opportunities like Stand Up for Cancer, breast cancer awareness, Race for Life, etc. Give people time off. We've spoken about that. Take gender out of the conversation. We've spoken about that. Every person's unique. And I guess my biggest learning in all of this was that I know I've become a lot more humble as a result of having cancer. I know I have. I see the joy in lots of things that perhaps I didn't see before. But I think the biggest thing that anyone can do is just be kind. Just be kind to someone else, because you don't know if that's the person that's decided not to speak up or tell anyone that they've got cancer and try and hide it. You don't know what anyone's going through. It could be someone who is completely flooded this week and their anxiety are off the scale in terms of how they're feeling. But I know it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But to just share a smile, show your care, be kind. I know it's taught me to do a lot more of that than I was doing before.
You have I'm sure it gives you a completely different outlook on life, and having more of an attitude of gratitude.
Totally.
We don't really see that, probably just take for granted.
It is. It's the joy in the smallest of things. It's the noticing something. It's looking up. I went to London the other day, and I forgot to take my phone. I left it in the car completely by accident, and I felt for the first 10 minutes like my arm had been cut off, and maybe I should just turn around and go back, because how was I going to manage without my phone? I looked around. There was 8 people in my carriage. Every single one of them was on their phone. Not one person looked up. So it gave me time to look at them, to people watch, which I love doing, but to look out the window, to just see stuff and just think, you know what, actually today's a really nice day. I wouldn't have seen that. I'd have been looking down. I'd have been scrolling. So yeah, absolutely.
That's such a good point, right? How often are we actually truly present in the moment? We're just glued. Like the second you leave a location, you're on your phone, and then you're back in a meeting or in a Zoom call, like we said earlier.
Exactly.
Like it's also, for example, one of the importances of getting together in person, like we discussed earlier, right?
Yeah.
When there's no mobiles, there's no Zoom, and you're just present in the moment. We're truly present.
Yeah.
I kind of learned that at home with my daughter, Robin. Like just because I'm in the same room as her doesn't mean I'm present.
No.
Because you can be on a mobile, you could be on a call, you could be distracted. So now I try my best just to leave my phone somewhere completely different in the house and like just be present in the moment with her.
Yeah.
Like
and get into her world.
Yeah.
Get into her world.
Yeah.
And I think that's that's one of the things that I'm saying. When you're present, you're aware. So it's not like, I've got to talk to that person and they're up very well. Oh my God, poor me. Actually, it's not about you. Whenever you're talking to somebody that's got something to tell you, it's about them. Mm-hmm. So how do you make sure you show up and you give them the respect that they deserve as they tell you whatever it is that they're going to tell you? Yeah. Because it's a privilege to be on the receiving end to hear it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a privilege. Yeah, a lot of people see it as like a burden or a stress. It's a privilege that that person was willing to open up and talk
and
to
feel
you.
safe enough that they're in a position that you're going to accept whatever it is that they're going to say.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we haven't spoke about that you think is really important that we've missed?
No, I think it's I go back to what I said at the beginning. I don't have the answers, but as a HR professional, there were some things that I thought I knew, which I didn't. And I wish I'd known them. And if I had my time again, I would continue to keep this conversation going. And I would encourage people to, reach out to you, reach out to me, and find out more than perhaps they know without having to wait for a personal journey to put them in that position.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming back, and we're glad you're doing well.
It's been great to see you
as well. And I love how the fact that you, similar with our last conversation, you're always kind of it's interesting. Whenever I see that you're facing challenges, you use it as an opportunity to give back, like the last one we did.
Yeah.
You wanted to make sure people were aware of then, and now you're doing a similar thing. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
On behalf of everyone that's listening as well, and you're doing the same again. And it means a lot to people, and even if there's one person or a single individual that we can impact by having this conversation, it's going to be worth it.
100%.
Yeah.
And thank you for the opportunity.
No, all the best.
Take care.